Now, John, when you first run the software, you'll be presented with this control panel. Most of the controls in the software are for the guys who are in the lab. So to load your file, select file to convert, change it to SAS file, stocks and shares, and load your data file. At the moment it only works with that one file. Here it's loading and aligning all the different channels of data. Move that out of the way. Set your working directory. This is for exported files, but in your case there won't be any at the moment. That's the desktop. And then load first split, which loads all your data. This control panel is all your channels of data from 1962 all the way up to 2019. If you push down on the middle mouse button, it will toggle on and off this overlay, which you can move around by holding down left shift and your mouse button. Okay. So your first column is the item, second column is left click where you left click your mouse, the third column is the right click mouse, and the delta is the difference between the two in time. That's when you click above this orange line. When you click below the orange line, you're adjusting the start time point of what you're viewing, and the right click is the right time extreme. Notice the graphs above here will automatically rescale based on the max and minimum data in view, so they don't go off the top. If you hold down the left Alt key, you can keep this window width and slide through the data. If you notice there, the blue, this data starts later in time than others, so it's 0 before this. As we go back in time, you start to see others like this one here. It has no data until 1973. Those other ones start down in 62. Okay, just be aware some data points like this one here, it actually finishes a day before the rest of the data. So yeah, so you'll end up with a 0 point, which could skew your results if you're not careful. I'll explain that later. Okay, so yeah, that's your 2D view of your data that I talked about earlier. So whatever is viewed in here is what's displayed on the 3D graph. So as I slide through the data in view is what's available to the 3D system. To bring up the 3D, click Sync 2D 3D and then click Show 3D. Okay, so when you're in this panel, you'll see various controls appear. Okay, as I said, most of these controls are not of any use to yourself. So to get rid of them, hold down left control and click that button to get the maximum 3D viewing area. I'm going to move this down off the screen a little bit to give you a bit more room, and just try to maximize that a little bit more. Okay, so if you right click, get your various plots. XYZ plot is a 3-dimensional plot. Okay, so you've got your, by default it's 1 year versus 10 year versus AAA 10 year. Okay, so you can move this out of the way by going over there, holding down shift. You can move the control panel out of the way a little bit. That keeps a relative position from the visual. So yeah, these controls, as I said before, are standard for all the different types of visuals. Obviously this one is delete the visualization, nothing special there. So this one here, I did mention earlier on the phone, it's 2D data tracking. So if I turn that off, then if I slide through, hold on Alt and slide through the data at the bottom, nothing changes in the visual. If I was to then click jump to data from 2D window, the 2D data down here, it basically moves to where the data is in a visual on the 2D graphic. If you click 2D data tracking again, you'll see this data will synchronize. Well, if I move to another position rather first, and then click it, this data will update to the currently viewed data on the 2D graph. There you go. Not so much use for yourself like this. You talked about the sphere earlier. If I turn off the quads, the sphere, it's more for three-dimensional data like accelerometry reading. Not much use to you. It's just a visual addition. The vectors you can turn off and on. Cogs, again, they're not really of much use to yourself. So the quads are, well, this graphic is probably the most useful, or the only thing useful to yourself. It gives the scale for each axis, which can be vastly different from one to the next, depending on what you're looking at. As I said before, the data at the center of the graphic, or the origin of this 3D graph, is not 0, 0, 0. It's based on the data you're looking at. The data will, by default, auto-centralize on each of the three axes and normalize. So if I reset the rotation, you can see it's from 0.34 up to 5.3 on here, 2.08 up to 5.26, and then on the z-axis it's 0.63 to 2.79. So it's basically off center, and each of the three axes are not the same scale. They were normalized for the data you view. So if I reset that to make it clear, as I move through the data, you'll see that if you see the numbers on the left side of the red axis, they will rescale based on the data. Same for the y-axis as well. I'll zoom out on this a little bit. You can name your instance. By default, it's the type of graph XYZ, but we can call it Fred if we want. And then click Enter. It's now called Fred. That may be of use if you've got lots of graphs up and want to individualize them rather than having them all called XYZ. If you've got multiple graphics up, then you can. You want to clear the space a bit, you can do it just automatically. Oh, that was nice. Automatically move them all out of the way. Info label, not so much use. Sometimes it's easier. It's nicer to view. They get a bit of contrast with some screens using the alternative color, blue or orange. If you want to, I should talk about that later. What else? Okay, so each of these buttons up here, you can right click and it'll put a purple box around to show that these buttons here are extra attributes of this one here, of these buttons here. See? So this is an orientation reset. If you right click, then you can use your mouse wheel. Down the bottom here, which it vanishes when I move off the button, but it shows the buttons that on the mouse that interact with that button. So this is mouse wheel, which changes the thickness of the button of the pixels, and you change how they're displayed. So it's either pixels, or if you slide the mouse wheel up a few notches, you end up with a joined line, which is they're joined up in time. If you right click on vectors, then you can change the thickness of all the lines. You can change, you can invert the colours between red, green, blue and another scheme, and you can change the magnitude of the vector axes. So with the quads you can change the intensity of the grid, so we can turn it right down and we can turn it right up. And you can change the font size. Sometimes it might be better on some displays to have a larger font. If you right click on data, reset orientation, and then right click on data sources at the top, you can get your third column of controls. These will be different from one visualization to the next. So this is for the XYZ graphic. If I smooth that down, so this control panel will always try to keep its position on the screen, so it will auto adjust itself. So select the graphic you want to interact with. If you're not selected, if you right click, you disassociate yourself from any graphic, so you can't rotate it, but left click in the center. The cross in the middle means that tracking is enabled. If I turn off tracking, then when you change your view in the 2D, this will not change, but we want that to update for now. So right click, and we've got our X, Y, and Z channels, and the color by. So each data point is colored by the value of that channel. If I bring on the color map and then hold down Control, you can readjust the position of that. So each of the data points in here over time is colored by the value of gold on that day, ranging from 252 to 385. Okay, so we can adjust x-axis, the y-axis, and the z-axis. Okay, so let me turn this one off. Let me get rid of that. Get rid of that one. The 2D plot is the same as the 3D plot. It's just 2 axes rather than 3. The 1D 2D histoplot. Okay, so this has a slightly different method of rotation because of the type of graphic it is. So you can't just spin it around like that. You get because of the type of graphic it is, it gives you an extra notice. So if you put your mouse over here, it gives you an instruction that you can hold down the Alt key and use your mouse to do the other axis of rotation if you wish. Okay, so again, mouse wheel will rescale. The controls here are different now. You can change it to a surface plot as opposed to blocks. You can change the data to logarithmic. You can use your mouse wheel to change the opacity, or I might get semi-transparent, but the transparency is only works from one particular viewing direction. And you can toggle off the black lines that go around the actual graphic. So all these controls down here are the same with every visual again. So you can right click and get the vertical scale. You can also adjust in the one axis there. If you right click again, you've got your various channels. This is just basically a histogram. Here it says, I'm going to move this across, Y channel. Notice it says channel Y enabled. If I left click, that becomes a 1D histogram of what's on the X channel. Okay. And if I slide through the data using the Alt key, get a dynamic histogram in data. So we can bring the Y channel back on, and okay, bins. This is the bins in the X, so we can increase the number of bins, make it high resolution. Same with the Y. I'll just do this, might be a bit more clear. So reduce the Y, and you can see they become oblong, rectangular. Okay, so that's about 100 by 100 data points. So color is the same as height. The more data points that fall within that bin, the higher it is, and the redder it is. The lower it is, the more blue it is. So what else is there? Okay, so if you wanted to, well, hang on, let me bring up the. Okay, so this little panel here, if you hold down Shift, you can relocate it. So this is the minimum and maximum values in the X, whichever channel that is, which is probably $. The Y is 3.13 to 5.32 for the Y, which is the 10-year. Ignore this full X for Y, it's not used anymore. If we slide through the data, then you'll see that those channel values will update. And the way what we can do is we can set what the min and max values are by, if we say lock histogram range, it will lock it to these values here. So if I transfer these values down to the user set values as a starting point, we get our graphic back. But we can actually set these, if we like, to a specific value. So it might not be so clear actually. If I set that to say 2, and then just click anywhere, then that value gets entered into the Y. If I put that click there and set that to 7, now our data becomes, so this range is, this here is from 2 to 7, and that's 79, and that's 113. So I can set this to, let's say, 60. Click anywhere, set that to 130, and click anywhere. Now, because now that these axes are not, because we've set this here to histogram locked ranges, that's locked on our set range X and Y. So as I slide through the data, you can actually see how the data will move around the graphic without automatically adjusting the X, Y range. If I turn that off, and you notice that it will dynamically resize, which can be confusing. So in a lot of cases, it's probably better to fix the range, adjust it to whatever you want, and there. It won't affect clustering, but it will affect the scale of what you're looking at in particular areas. This will possibly cause problems if you have data going out of the bin range. You'll probably find those data points will vanish. Try that. If I set that to 100, and see some data is actually it's bunches up on one side. I should maybe correct that so that any data points, you drop that down again, 80. So most of our data is actually quite high up. So yeah. So it only displays data if there's anything to display. So it's not bunching up. It's not bunching up on the highest bin or lowest bin. So that's actually what it's doing is correct. So yeah, copy current limits basically copies the X and Y current values into the set range, and then you activate the set range by locking histogram ranges. You can turn that panel off with this button here. So X, Y, Z, color map, ignore that for now. I think there's possibly an export. Where's it? Kind of thinking my feet here. Right, there's no export of the data, but I can add that in if it's useful, so that you'll end up with a CSV matrix of values that you can load into Excel if you find one of these 2D histograms useful. Okay, I'll move on to the 3D histogram. It should be fairly similar to the 2D histogram. Okay, so again, we've got all the standard controls down here. Got your quads, which give you the scales for each of the 3 axes numerically. And you've got all the standard controls. You can right click. You can, that one doesn't rescale. I'll try and change the thickness there. Anyway, so we can right click on data reset, right click on sources. We've got your X, your Y, your Z. For the colour, change there. You've still got the channels, they're just not showing up so well. X, Y, and Z. And then the number of bins. All 3 axes are on the same scaling, so again here it's X, Y, Z on 35 by 35. You can bring the number of bins right down if necessary. And to give you a coarse representation. Oops. So right click, X, Y, Z, number of bins. In fact, if I bring that down, this might make this next bit clearer. If I go to base size, if I use my mouse wheel to drop this down, in fact, if you go off the control panel, hold down left shift, use your mouse wheel up and down, you get this mouse wheel sensitivity. That allows you to change things at a faster rate. By default it's value 1, which makes changing something like this quite painful. So base size, so it takes a lot longer to change the value. So if you increase that to say 10 or 20, then you can adjust this very quickly. So the base size is the 0 size of the block effectively, and then where a bin has a lot of data, it's larger and more red on top of the base bin size. So what else have we got? Okay, so again you've got like you have with the 2D histogram, you've got the set range, so we can tell it to copy the values down from the current range, and we can tell it to somewhere. We can tell it range is set so that the description is slightly different, but it's not locked or it's locked. So if I was to slide to the data, you'll see that the position doesn't dynamically shift around to try to center itself. It just stays where it's put. Again, hopefully that's of some use. Increase the number of bins and make it nice. Increase the bin size as well. So yeah, there you go. And then if I turn off the lock, you'll find that everything will rescale. So again, we've got a color map, which I'm going to turn off. There's Turn that off. The color map, so control, actually move the color map across. So 0 to 22, 0 basically represents the nothingness in the graphic. 22 represents the, oops, because I've got the mouse sensitivity high. So hold down shift and then bring that down to maybe 5 or 10 to let you have a bit more control over the scaling. But that 22 there represents that red block there. And that is, let me bring the vectors back on. Don't know the colour. Okay, so that block, where is it? The block, red block's over here, and that is, well, it's 1 year versus the 10 year versus the AAA at that position there. It's hard to say what it represents, but there it is. Okay, yeah, I think that's it for a starter really. If you get bored with the black colour, you can toggle the background and use your mouse wheel, get a little honeycomb thing, and alternatively just get like a rough patch background, which might be nice for a capture. If I turn off this for a second, if you have that box there ticked, and you come back in here and hold down control and click there. If you then click capture screen and move your mouse wheel off, it will save an image or a capture of that screen. So here we have move it into your viewing area. Somewhere in there. So this is a screenshot that's been saved into your working directory, which is the desktop in my case. So yeah, there we have it. That's a bit of a 30-minute intro to the software. There's a lot more that you can do with the software. A lot of it is more applicable to the acceleration stuff. At the moment, the only channels that are available on your graphics are the channels that you provide with dates. Other stuff that I've been working with Rory on is expanding the system so that you can do differentials. So you can look at rate of change of the various channels, which might actually, well, probably more applicable to your stuff, stocks and shares, than with the animal work, because you'd want to see the rate of change of one or more channels every day or every week. So you want to see how quickly something's rising or dropping over time, perhaps in proportion to a different channel. So I can maybe bring that in, so you'd have your standard channels, but then the differentials of those channels, the rates of change over time, and those plotted in 3D might be more interesting than just the raw data. But I'll leave it there for now and just see how you get on. Incidentally, when you try to run my software, you basically, I'll be sending you a zip file. Download it. You need to extract all the files to a folder on your desktop, perhaps, and run the file called DDMT with today's date. If when you run it you get an error saying something like VC 140 something is or a DLL file is missing, then please run and install the Microsoft VC Redist x64 executable. It's also in the package You may have to restart the computer, but that will install the Microsoft runtime libraries required by my software if they haven't already been installed on your computer by other software. But any problems, let me know. The software basically works in Windows 10 64-bit, which is what most people are running on these days. Yeah, let me know how it goes. Thank you.